Hello and welcome back to our webinar series on product management training with Ftrack. This is session number 5, where you'll learn how to manage review, media settings, and notifications. In our previous session, which was 2 weeks ago, we focused on setting up views and dashboards in Studio. Per usual, if you wish to access any of the previous sessions, do reach out to your sales development rep or your customer success rep, or just let us know here. If you do have the link to the previous sessions, you will also have the link to this session once it finishes here, and processes, it will be in the same bucket. But if anybody wants access to those or wants to see what those are about, absolutely reach out to us again. I'm Michael Sears, CYRS. I'm sales development for the Americas here at Backlight, and I'm once again one of your hosts for the webinar. We have Kyla Laban back in action, ready to help us out again. 7 years of visual effects experience in television. Worked for MPC, worked for Method, worked on WandaVision, Ghost in the Shell, and lots more. Today, we're running through just kind of 3 key areas. The first, and that's the biggest, is how to set up and manage review sessions, both internal and external. External sessions in the Ftrack environment we call client reviews. Number 2 is adding media to Ftrack, which is a big topic. And then also notifications. How do people know when things change, and how do you change how you want to know about things? Once again, Kyla will be running the show. We do expect it to go the full hour. As usual, we have a Q&A panel. We have people ready to answer questions live. If we don't answer them in the chat, we will make sure that we have time, a little bit of time at the end, to go through which ones we didn't get through in the meantime. Also, we will make sure we get back to you if we run out of time at the hour and just don't get to your questions. Also, per usual, we do have office hours set up again at the same time, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, this Thursday, February 8th. And I think that's all the administrative stuff we need to get to. So let's do session number 5. Let's begin. Go ahead and take it away, Kyla.
Thanks, Michael. All right, so here we are, session 5. Thanks for joining us again, everyone. As Michael's already mentioned, what we're going to be covering today is review, media, and notifications. So we're moving away finally from all of the production tracking stuff. I know you're all really, really sad about that. So we'll be taking a look at our integrated review player and how that functions. Before we get into that, of course, you can't use our review player if you don't have any media to review in your Ftrack workspace. So we'll go over how to actually get all of the media you need reviewed into Ftrack. And then very, very quickly at the end, we will go over notifications, where you can set that up for the entire workspace and where your users can go and set their own personal notification preferences. So first up, let's talk about how do you actually get all of the media you need to have reviewed into Ftrack. So there are 2 different ways that you can do this. There is going to be uploading, and there's going to be publishing. So uploading is generally the most straightforward way to do this. And this is simply by just dragging and dropping your media files directly into the Ftrack UI. So when we're talking about media files, we're talking about video files, still images, PDFs, and audio files. So we're not talking about the project files that your artists are working on, their output directly out of tools like Maya or Nuke. We're talking about just the reviewables. So that is option number 1. And then when we're talking about publishing, we're talking about using either, there's 3 different ways to do this, first of all. So we are talking about either using the standalone publisher tool in our Ftrack Connect application. So if you're not familiar with Ftrack Connect, that's a locally installed application. It is our integration solution. It has a little widget that you can publish media directly from there as well. You can also publish from a DCC through one of those integrations that we support. And the third option is to publish through the API. So I'm only going to be showing option 1 and 2 today because I'm not a developer and I can't use the API, but that is option number 3 if that is something that you know how to do. So let's go through those 2 options now very quickly so we can understand how all of your media lands into Ftrack. Let's get back to my screen here. There we are. All right, so for demo purposes, I've just made this very, very tiny project with just a shot and some tasks linked to it, so it's easy to see. I've already got a little bit of media that has been added in here, just as an example. So, and of course, worth mentioning as well that I am going to be doing this from the task spreadsheet, but this exact same functionality is available to your artists from the My Tasks page. So they will be doing the exact same thing I'm doing here, where they can just click on their task name on their little task card to access this functionality in the sidebar. So I've got this task here that I've just clicked on. I'm on the sidebar and I've made sure that I've selected the versions tab. And from here, if I want to upload, I can just grab a video file that I have here. This is an MP4, and I can just drag and drop it directly into the sidebar. So you can see that that is uploading now. Once the upload's completed, it's going to start an encoding process so that I have a web proxy that I can view in the review player. So hopefully that shouldn't take very long. There we go, encoding process started. Once the encoding starts, you can also keep track of how that's going in your jobs tab up in the top right. So you can see that's letting me know it's running. This is somewhere that you can see whether or not maybe there's an error that has prevented it from completing as well. And there we go. We've got a version that's been uploaded. I can now click on that to open it up in the review player. So that's uploading. And another thing that's generally pretty important, especially for studios to be able to track when they are reviewing their media, is versioning. So is there a revision that your artist has needed to do on something that they've previously uploaded? Ftrack can help you keep track of version numbers, and there's a couple different ways that you can do this. So option number one is to just continuously, against the same task, just keep uploading a file with the exact same file name. So as an example, and this is lifted straight out of our help documentation, let's say that I drag and drop the file here called red car. Ftrack will look at this task, recognize that there isn't an asset that exists already called red car, and so it will say, okay, I'm going to make this red car V1 or version 1. If I went away, made some changes to that file, still kept it called red car, and then uploaded it once again, Ftrack would recognize, okay, I already have red car V1, so I'm going to make this red car V2, and so on and so forth for however many iterations are needed. However, my experience, and I'm sure it's probably the same for many of you, is that generally we don't want our artists overwriting a previous version in their scene file, because let's say the client goes, you know what, revert back to version 3, and that file is gone. We're going to have a little bit of a scramble trying to recreate that. So another option that we have, and you can adjust this in the system settings. So refresher, that's click on your user icon, go to system settings if you have that accessible in your user permissions. I've already got it open in a tab here. And we're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom to advanced, and we're going to click on advanced settings. And you're going to make sure that this is checked where it says automatic version numbers. And what this will do is if there is a version number within the file name itself, Ftrack will recognize that and apply that as the version number for that particular version once the upload is completed. I'll also just quickly call out while we're here that if you have a specific version number padding that's required, you can adjust that here as well. So however many zeros you need before the actual version number, you can adjust that right here. So as an example of this, I'm going to go over to this particular task here. And you can see I've got two versions that have been uploaded here, and one is Palm Trees V1 and one is Palm Trees V2. And the reason it's displaying this way is if I go back to my Finder and let's just highlight these here, you can see that in the file names itself, ahead of the .mp4 file extension, there's Palm Trees V1 and Palm Trees V2. So Ftrack recognized those file numbers there and then appended them, added them as the correct file numbers upon upload. So that's another way that you can keep track of versioning when you're uploading. All right, so now moving on to publishing. So as I already mentioned, publishing is done either through Ftrack Connect or through a DCC integration. Before you get into that though, you will need to install Connect and you will likely need to set up the storage scenario. I'm not going to go through this process step by step, just in the interest of time today. So we do have help documentation that can help you out with that if you don't already have Ftrack Connect configured for your studio. But to set up a storage location, what you're going to do in the system settings is go to Media Management. storage scenario. And it'll probably ask you to do something like set up a centralized storage scenario here. And if I just click through this quickly, it's going to ask you to put an amount point. I've just sort of fudged this, and I'm using basically my Google Drive mounted locally on my laptop to mimic this so that I have something to demo for today. But that's basically how you're going to set that up. And what this will allow you to do is through the standalone publisher or through those DCC integrations that we support, those files, including in this case, the actual project files that your artists are working on, can get copied into that storage location that you've configured. So what this will do is give you a nice centralized directory on your storage of all of the files and reviewables that are linked to your project. So in order for us to publish now, I'm going to start off with the standalone publisher, and I'm going to publish to this animation task. And if I want to launch the publisher widget, I'm going to click on this little icon right here, Publish Files with Connect. And that's opened up on my other window. So here is Connect. This is the Publish widget. And you can see that it's linked to the task that I've clicked on here. So I know right away that I'm publishing this and linking it to the correct task. And let me grab some files now. All right, so I'm going to pretend that I'm publishing this Maya scene. So I've got my Maya file here. I've got a little play blast that I've rendered out, and I've got a JPEG of the background that I've used in the file. So what I can do is I can actually publish all three of these files at the same time, and they will all be connected to the same version. So I'm going to select all of those. I'm going to drag and drop these into the Connect UI. So there's my files. And you can see here that I have the option to either create a brand new publish or version up an existing publish. So this gives me the flexibility. If I'm iterating on something and I've already made some changes, I can version something that already has been worked on previously. If I click on this, you can see that it gives me a list of existing assets that I can select from. I am going to create something new though. I'm going to select the asset type that I want this to be. I'm going to say this is a scene file in this case. I'm going to give this a name. So I'm going to call this a girl. And web playable, what this is asking me to select is which one of these components that I'm publishing I want Ftrack to recognize and encode so that I can review it in the review player. In this case, obviously, I'm going to select the play blast that I rendered out as an MP4. So that's this one here. I can add a little customized thumbnail if I want, and I can give a little description that will show up on the versions page. So I can say this is first published for feedback. And now I will hit publish. And this will now kick off that process to copy those files to that storage location that I configured in the system settings. You can see I've got the encoding job that's now running up here. And we'll just leave that to run in the background. And I'll come back and show you what that looks like. And in the meantime, while I'm not going to go through every single step, if I want to do that exact same thing through a DCC integration, I'm going to click on this little rocket ship icon here to launch the DCC application that I'm going to be working out of, which I already have open just in the interest of saving some time. So here is a Maya session. Here is a lovely donut that I made because I have very, very wonderful artist skills. And you can see right here that there is an Ftrack menu that's available because I launched this through the Connect integration. And I can select the publisher from here, and that will open that up there. Again, I can say I'm going to publish out a scene. I can give the scene a name. It's also, you can see, recognizing that I have already completed a publish on this. So I could select this to be version 2 of this previous file if I wanted to, or I could give it a name and create a new file. I can set a version status. And down here, you can see that this snapshot, this is going to be my Maya file, and then it's going to automatically generate that reviewable media for me once I click publish. I'm not going to complete this in the interest of time, however. So that's what that looks like from one of our integrations, just as an example. All right, so we've got our version that has been created here now from the publish I did through the standalone publisher. So obviously I can click on this to open it up and review it because I had my play blast that was rendered out. And the other benefit we have here is if I click on the version and go to this Components tab, you can see where this tag says Studio Central Storage Location. I've got some file paths. So for example, if I highlight this one here, and it might be a little bit small to see properly on a screen share, but this is actually the file path where this Maya binary file was published to on that storage that I configured. And I can actually click on this and navigate straight to that directory if I want to. I'm not going to do that because it will just open directly where the file is. If I want to show you what this is going to look like on your storage, if you configure this, however. So here is my storage for my project. So I've got a folder for the project name. I've got a folder for the sequence name because I published against a sequence called sequence 1. I've got a folder for the shot. There's my asset that I published. And there's my version with all of my files connected. So that's kind of the benefit of using the publisher or the integration to actually publish out your media, is that you can have this nice tidy directory for all of your project files going forward from there. All right. So now we know how to get our media into Ftrack, and so let's get into reviewing it. So I'll go through the review player and its features, and then what we're going to do is talk about how we can set up the two different types of reviews that you can conduct within Ftrack. So we do have the concept of both internal reviews and external reviews or client reviews. And there's two different places that you can use to set these up. So for internal reviews, you can use lists. We already covered lists very, very briefly in session 2, I believe. While we were setting up our project, we know that we can use lists to kind of group together different objects or different tasks that maybe you can't filter on to pull them up very easily. We use the example of maybe having a selection of shots that are needed for a trailer delivery. So you can use that list to put together groups of versions that need to be reviewed when you're doing reviews internally. If you want to be able to send that review out externally, though, let's say you want to put a bunch of versions together for your client to provide feedback on. This is when you're going to use our client review interface instead. And when we get into the client review interface, there's a little bit of Ftrack terminology that I'm going to be using. So if I am talking about a user within the context of the review features, this is exactly the same as if I'm talking about a user in the rest of your Ftrack workspace. So this is specific to somebody who has a username and a password and can log into your Ftrack workspace. Of course, also provided they have their user role permissions set up that they can access the client review features, but this is an internal user. If I'm talking about a collaborator, I am talking about someone external who can't actually log into your Ftrack workspace. So someone like a client that you would like to invite into a review session to get their feedback. And if I'm talking about a participant, I'm talking about both of those types of people. So just anybody who happens to be participating in a review session. So let's go and take a look at how we can set that up. And then we'll take a look at some other additions we have to our review platform that might be helpful for you in your workflows. So I'm going to actually hop back over to Napo so that there's a little bit more media for us to play around with. So I'm going to go over here. And we'll start off with, we'll start off and just take a look at the review player itself. So of course, we know that there is a versions page attached to every single project where you can see all of the media that is linked to that particular project. And you can go ahead and open up the review player straight from here, just by clicking on the thumbnail for a version, which I know my thumbnails are very tiny right now, but there you go. And that will open up our review player. And one quick side note, I'm sure that there are some of you out there who might be looking at my review player and going, mine looks different, what's going on? So this is our new review player. It's technically still considered a beta feature, but is hopefully going to be rolled out soon. If you'd like to activate this in your workspace and give it a try, I'm just going to show you how to do that very quickly as a little quick detour. So going back into your system settings, still in this advanced section down here, click where it says experimental, and just make sure that you have these checked right here, the new client review player and the new web player. So that's going to activate it for your workspace. And then from there, you're just going to need to make sure that you set it as your preferred player for yourself as a user. So you're going to go over to your user icon in the top right. You're going to click on My Account. And over on the menu on this side, you're going to go player, and just make sure for the preferred player that you have the new web player beta selected. And then you might need to do a quick refresh to get it to activate, but that should then give you the player, whoops, wrong tab, that we're seeing right here. So in this player, of course, you can click right here to play the version, or there's the play pause button down at the left-hand side here. We have a looping feature, so I've got this turned on right now. This means that my video will just continue to loop as it plays through, or I can turn that off if I want it to just stop after playing through one time. So you can see that's just playing over and over again. I've got a little bit of version information that I can see down here, as well as a little thumbnail. I can update the the status of the version from here. We've got our annotation tools. So a few different things that I can access here. We've got, a brush. It's probably not the best color to be using. Arrow, things like that. I can change the color of the tool if I want to. I can change the line thickness. And if I want to clear my annotations very quickly, I can just click that button there. And we've also got flip and flop if you need to look at your media in another orientation. You can download the media if you need to. We've got volume controls if you do have a video with audio embedded in it, or if you're just looking at an audio file, can also put it to full screen. And very handy, we also have a keyboard shortcut little cheat sheet just directly built into the player. So if you want to use hotkeys instead, you can refer to this little cheat sheet. Now, heading over to the little sidebar over here, right now we're on the feedback tab, so you can actually see there's previous feedback that's been put against this particular version. I can click on the time code to bring me to that note or that section. See those annotations as well. I can write a new note here as well. So this little button will make this into a completable item. There's an example of that with this note just below. So you can see that I've got this little check mark. What I can do from now is that, let's say I went ahead and addressed that note, I could just click on that, and you can see that it's marked it as completed. And I can change that back if it was a mistake. So that's something you can do to track any outstanding notes that you get on your versions. I can add a label to it, so you can see some examples of those down here for different types of feedback you might be getting. If I'd like to add a frame capture to my note, I can just click that. You can see it's added a little frame capture right there. I can @mention one of my internal users, so I can click on that button, or I can just type the @ symbol as well. Let's say maybe you need to flag a note to a different artist to pick something up. That's a feature you can use to be able to do that. And then finally, you can also attach a file. So if you've got an external file as maybe a reference image or something that needs to be attached to the note, you have that ability as well. And let me move away from this frame to somewhere where there's not an annotation already. Pardon me. All right, so let me put in maybe an annotation right here. And you can see, here's my written note, and that annotation that I drew was automatically attached to it. So that's something else that we have that's available so that you're not having to remember to go back and actually commit those annotations. Just write a quick note to explain what you need going along with it, hit send, and that will automatically attach that annotation so you don't have to go back and do those extra steps. So that's all of those feedback features. You can also organize these either by the date that the note was given. So is this the most recent note? Or you can organize it by frame as well, from the beginning to the end of the shot timeline. Up next, we've got the info tab here. So this is your asset information. This is very similar to what we can see down here in the bottom left. I've got the status for the version itself, and I can update it here. But then I've got a little bit more information linked to it that I can see. So I have I can see what user published this. I can see the version number. I can also see the task that it's linked to, and I can update the status of the task if I need to as well. This information down here, these are all custom attributes, and we're talking about custom attributes next week, so I'm not going to touch on this right now. And then lastly, we've got the playlist tab. So obviously there's not a whole lot being shown here because I only opened up one individual version. This will show more when we actually go into a proper playlist. But if I maybe do want to add in another version to look at without going back to my versions page, I can do that straight from here. So I'm going to click add version. You can see I've got all of my, my versions on this particular project available, and I can do a little search. So maybe I want to search the shop number. And I'm going to bring in this animation, let's say. So I can click on this and save changes. And you can see I've now got an animation version of this same shot in the playlist. I can sort these alphanumerically if I want. I can drag and drop them to reorder them manually. And I can group these in different ways as well. So no grouping, because I only have 2 versions right now, isn't going to show much of a change. Currently, this is grouped by asset. So this is a compositing asset, and this is an animation asset. So these are grouped separately. If I group these by shot, though, we'll see it's collapsed those 2 together. Next to the version number, I've got this little 2 in parentheses right here, and I've got my little drop down where I can see both of the versions. It's done that below here as well. So with the thumbnails, I've got them there. But what this activates is our compare features. So you can see I've got this little icon that is no longer grayed out right here, and I can click that. And now I can actually compare these versions side by side, as we're seeing here. Or I can also overlay this with adjustable opacity. And obviously it looks like we're using the correct animation and compositing, so good for us. And that at a very high level is all of the features in the review player. There are a couple of additional features that will come in the client review interface specifically, which I'll go over in a little bit. But in terms of the internal review, this is everything that is available to you. So let's talk about putting together an actual playlist. Let's start with internal reviews and using lists. So again, we're going to be accessing that from over here on the side. These are all the different list categories that I have in my workspace. Reminder, if you want to be able to kind of customize your own list categories, you can do this in the system settings. This is going to be under that workflow section in the menu that we used when we were setting up our workflow schema. You'll find that information there. And I've got my dailies category. You can see that I've already got some dailies lists that have been created here. I can click on this one here. There are all the versions that are in that particular list. And reminder, this is similar to setting filters and things. If you want to unselect this list, just click on your project name, and that will bring you back to your full versions list. So I'm going to do this very, very simply. I'm just going to go to filters and say, I want to look for everything that's pending review on my versions page. And I'm going to select just a chunk of things to add into a list. So holding down Shift, there are all my versions. To add to a list, I will either use the list icon right here. You can see I can create from selected, add to an existing list. I can remove them from a list if maybe I put them in the wrong place by accident, or I can just move them to the right list. Or alternatively, I can just right click on my group of versions and I have under lists the exact same functionality available. I'm going to create a new one. Let's call this Anim Dailies 08. Even though I have some compositing versions in there. All right, and I'm going to make sure I select my dailies category and hit create. And so I've got a brand new list right here. I'm just going to remove my filter so we can see the changes there. So here's my full versions page, and then I can click into my list, and there are all the versions that I selected. So I can highlight these, right click, and go play with if I want to. Or since this is organized in a list, I can click on this little drop-down arrow, go play with, and I'm going to go new web player. So it opens up as the overlay here. And you can see now that I have my player open again. Here's an example of being able to see more of those thumbnails where I can click on to navigate through different versions. And for the playlist tab here, you can see I've got multiple versions here, and I can drag and drop these to reorder them as I need to. And now that there's a proper playlist that's been generated, one additional feature that you can do while you're looking at multiple versions at once is over on the playback options here. This is available in individual versions as well, but of course there's playback speed. But I can also select whether or not I want to play back a selection and string them together, or if I want to play back everything strung together in the playlist. So if I go play selection, let's say I just want to see these 4, and I can hit confirm. And you can see now I've got those 4 shots all strung together, and I can play them back one after another, or I can say play all, and that's going to grab every single version that is in this playlist and string them together. This isn't creating any kind of official edit. This is just giving you that ability to see all of those versions one after another in your playlist if you want to see them in context. All right. And so that is creating a list for internal review. So this would be a way you could organize your versions for maybe someone internally who needs to give review feedback, maybe a lead, maybe a department supervisor, maybe a VFX supervisor, or an animation director. Now let's get into client reviews for when you want to actually share this information externally. So our client review page is just above the lists over here. You can see it looks very similar. I've got some folders where I've got my lists, my client review lists organized here. A little bit differently than when you're setting up a list though. If you want to have a folder to organize your client reviews, you're going to click on this little drop down here and say folder. So I've got a new folder. I will give it a name. Let's do client reviews. And I can just drag these reviews in here like this. You can see those are all organized now. All right. Actually, I'm going to grab the versions from that list so it's a little bit faster. There we go. So let's say we're going to make a client review from these versions. So I can right click on these, and instead of going to lists, down here I'm going to go to add to client review. You can see very similar to the lists, I have access to the other reviews that have already been created, and I can add these to an existing review, or I can create a new one. So let's create a new one here. And I've got a brand new review session that's been created over on the side. And here is our client review interface where you can actually organize and administer the review session. So I'm going to give my review session a name. I can add a little description if I want to. And then in order to control the review session, to do things like, of course, invite the people you need to receive feedback from, that's all going to be handled in this little side portion over here. So let's talk about these, and we'll start from the bottom and work our way up. So first off is, how are you going to be sharing this review with anyone who you would like to invite as a collaborator? So first up, you can invite them directly with their email address. I can click add collaborator. I'll just need to put in their name, their email address, hit save. This will send them an email invite, and in that email, they'll receive a link that they can click on that will redirect them to the browser window where they can open up and use the review features from there. So you can use it that way. If maybe you have too many people that you need to invite to a review and you think this is going to take a really long time to be manually inputting all sorts of names and email addresses, the other option is to create a share link. So I can check this, and you can see now I have a link that was created. I can just copy that to my clipboard and send that out to a group of people. If security is really important, we do have passphrase protection. So it will just randomly generate a string for you, but you can erase this and put in whatever you want your password to be. You can also send notifications, and you can allow people to download the original media. So this is going to be the reviewable file, so the videos, the images, that kind of thing, if that's something that people need to be able to do. And then up here we have the review session availability. So right now, this is a scheduled review. So you can see that the start date is, of course, today, and that this is going to be available until February 13th in this case. So that means that once February 13th has passed, even if someone has the link or they've been invited via email to come to this particular review session, they're not going to be able to access it anymore. The other options we have here is to just always leave it open. So if you don't want it to end up being closed after a specific date, you can just leave it always open. And then there's also, of course, the option to manually close it. Whoops, it didn't select. Well, it doesn't want to let me change that. All right, let's do a quick refresh. There we go. All right, so now it is closed and nobody can access the review. And you can, of course, always do that manually. I'm going to put this back to scheduled, though. Oh, we're getting some buggy things going with this drop-down menu. I'm going to flag that once we're done with this webinar. There we go. So we've got it scheduled again. All right. So that is setting up your review session. And then for these little buttons up here, open session is when you're actually ready to join the review yourself. You just click that button and it will redirect you into the review. Clone session. So let's say that you did have a big group of collaborators that you added in manually one by one via email, and you need all of those same people to be in a new review session that you're creating. So it's a brand new review playlist. It's a whole bunch of brand new media that you need to send to the exact same people to get their feedback. You can clone the session. What that's going to do is it's going to clone the settings of the session, including any collaborators you've added on, but it will not include the media. So this is not going to copy the same versions into that cloned review session. It's just the settings of the review session itself, but it can help you if you do need to set up a new review session with the same collaborators in the future. And then actions, this is if you need to extend any actions via the API. All right, so let's jump into our review. So we'll open session, and you can see in this case, it's actually opening it up in a new tab as opposed to an overlay player. And this pretty much looks identical to the interface when we're doing an internal review, but you may notice a few differences. So we've got a couple of little additional icons down here, and we've got some additional tabs in the side panel here. So of course, we've got our feedback. The second one here is approvals and interactions. So for any collaborators you invite, they're only going to be able to see this portion up here. But if you're an internal user, you can see this portion down here that's letting you know who's actually looked at the specific version that you're viewing right now. So of course, I'm the only person in this review right now. So it looks like 100% of the people in this review have looked at this particular version. If there is anyone else in here that had not looked at it yet, it would be visible down here. And this approved and required changes section here is tied to these little additional buttons. So this is how your collaborators can actually indicate whether they approve a version or if they have given feedback. And you can see if I click on these, it's updating this here and it's showing who is actually given an approval. Or if I say that I want some changes, it will update there. So that's how what you can track on that tab there. This info tab is only going to be accessible to any users when they're in the session. So your collaborators, your clients, they're not going to see this information because this is internal. We've got the playlist tab as usual. This is exactly the same. You've got all the grouping features. You can drag and drop to reorder them however you need. And then here, when you're a user, you can also share the review. So you don't have to go back to that page in your Ftrack workspace to, let's say, add someone else to the review. You can do it all within the review session. So if I want to invite somebody else via email, I can do that from here, or I can grab and copy that share link if I have that activated to be able to send that to someone. And then finally, I've got my review settings. So this is all of the settings that we have available right here, but I can control it again straight within the review session. I don't have to leave, come out here, adjust things, and then hop back in. I can just do it straight from within the player. And let me find a better version to click on. Here we go. And lastly, we also have our ghosting feature. So what this will allow you to do when it's turned on is actually have your annotations fade off after a series of frames. You can adjust how many before and after. I just have it set to 5 as standard right now. And what this will do is this might be helpful if you need to maybe kind of try to demonstrate movement with your annotations. So since I'm not much of a drawer and I just have a mouse, I'll use a little arrow tool. But let's say I want to say, move him this way. You can see that those are fading on and off as I step through this version. So if that's helpful to kind of give more clarity to the feedback when you're sending these notes to your artists, you also have that available as well. And of course, the last thing we have when you're doing a client review is we also have our sync review feature. So you can see up here that I have this button that says start sync. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my share link. And I'm going to open up a new browser and pretend that I am a client who is coming in to join this review session. So here we are. I'm going to paste that in. And this will also show you when you're inviting a collaborator what they're going to see. So you can see right here that the only thing they're going to need to enter, the only information they need is a name. So I will say that I am the client, and I'm going to join the review. And here we are. So you can see that now I have access to the exact same review interface. I've got my little approval buttons down here. You can see again, as I mentioned, there's less tabs up here on the side. I just have the approvals and interactions, and I've got the playlist. And I can go ahead and click through all these versions. I can input whatever feedback I want just on my own time if I want to, but we're talking about the synced feature. So let me kind of fudge this a little bit, shrink that down, make a little bit of space. There we go. All right. So this is the client down below. This is me, I guess, as an internal user up top here. And I'm going to click Start Sync. And you can see that the client was sent a prompt to join the synced session. So I'm going to hit Join. And you can see that that's pulled them into sync with me. So they're now seeing the same frame of this shot as I am up here. And if the client goes ahead and hits play, you can see that that started playing on my screen as well. And if the client draws a little annotation, that appeared up here. Or if I put a little arrow up here, that pops on the client screen. So if you would like to have an interactive review session, have everybody together, you can actually talk through the feedback that you're giving in real time and get more clarity instead of trying to decipher things through written feedback after the fact. You can use this synced review feature to do that. And an additional feature we have, you might have noticed there's this other icon. This is for presentation mode. So maybe you're presenting to a large group. Maybe this is some kind of briefing session where you're briefing on a new turnover or something like that, and you don't want people to be accidentally hitting pause or play or drawing annotations. You want to really fully drive the session. You can click this, and you can see that that has actually removed the drawing tools from the client. It's letting them know that I'm presenting. So now I'm the only person that can control the session. They've got their little approval or require changes interactions here, but they can't write any feedback. They can't change any versions on the playlist. So if you are in a situation where you want to drive the session, that's something else that is available there. All right, so that is for your client review interface and how to set up client reviews. Let's say goodbye to our fake client over here. And there is one final step for anyone who is a user who's taking part or organizing client review sessions, and that is the feedback transfer. So I'm going to leave the review. It is important to make sure you leave the review and don't just close the tab because it's saving the notes and the annotations. And at this point too, you also have the option, if you want to just close the review and make sure that your client's not going to sneak in again after you've closed it down, you can remove the guest access and close the review, or you can keep the review available. I'm going to keep it available. So now my review is closed and I can close this tab. So when you're doing an internal review from a list, all of those notes and feedback that you put in against those versions are going to automatically get attached to those versions, and your artists who uploaded or published those versions are going to automatically receive notifications for those notes. In a client review, that doesn't happen automatically. All of the feedback is going to be stored in this particular review session, so it needs to be transferred at the time that you want your artists to have visibility on those notes. So that is going to be handled down here. First up, you can generate a report straight from here. So if you'd like to create a PDF report of all of the notes that were put in the session, maybe you want to send it off to your client, you can click that. You can see that's been added to my queue here, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second when it's finished processing. There we go. And this is what this is going to look like here. Obviously, there's not a whole lot of comments or annotations, but there would be that included here. And so you can send that off to your client. And I'm going to actually hop over to a different review where there's a little bit of feedback to play around with. Here we are. All right. So to transfer this feedback back into your workspace, we're going to hit transfer feedback. And you can see that that's brought me to this page here where I can moderate all of the feedback that was put in against this particular review session. So you can see there's a big long list here of all sorts of written feedback and annotations that have been put against the versions that exist in this client review playlist. So I'm going to just select all so it's a little bit more visible. But you can see that next to every single piece of feedback, there's a little checkbox here. And what this allows you to do is actually choose which pieces of feedback you want to transfer back into your workspace. So maybe I don't want this note. I can unselect that. Maybe I don't want that one either, and that one either. You get the picture. You can basically go through and pick and choose which one of these notes is relevant that you want to address, that you want your artists to see. And you can also add in another note. So if maybe somebody forgot to write something, maybe someone was typing too fast, made a few too many typos, you want to clean that up, you can also add an additional note here and just add the note. You can see you can mark that as a completable item if you want to. You can also add attachments if there's maybe a reference image or a screenshot you'd like to include. And then for our little approve and require changes buttons that we have, you can map those back to the statuses that you're using against your versions in the rest of your workspace. So for any version where changes were required, where there was feedback given, maybe you want that to map back to a status like revise, so that you know that that version was looked at, that feedback was given. And maybe if the client approved it, you want that to go back to client approved. And so that will automatically update those versions against the statuses. After you've set all that, you're just going to hit start transfer. You see that's transferring the notes. It's let me know that it's transferred successfully. So now all of those notes will be visible against those versions in the rest of your workspace, and all of your artists who had versions that were included in this particular review, they will also be sent a notification for that particular feedback, which they'll receive in their inbox. All right, and before we get into notifications, one quick last thing, because we did mention there were some additional add-ons for our review features. So first of all, of course, these are additional costs. For the review interface itself, there is the Review Pro add-on. And what this will give you is, so that syncing feature that I just showed there, out of the box, you can only sync with 2 people. So that exact example that I gave where I've got one internal user, one collaborator, that's the maximum number of people you'll be able to sync with the Review Pro add-on. That will increase the number of people you can sync with. It will also increase the resolution of your media when you're looking at it in the review player. So you'll be able to get up to 4K video and up to 8K still images. Of course, if the original content is of a high enough resolution to create those. Satellite review. So this is specific to anyone who has an on-premise deployment of Ftrack where you're on your own network. And what this does is it actually opens up that client review functionality for you. So obviously an external client isn't going to be able to get onto your own network and be able to collaborate in a review session. So satellite review essentially allows you to take that client review you've put together, push it up temporarily into a cloud workspace that is not on your closed network that a client can join. You can handle that review. And then at the time that you transfer that feedback back to your on-premise workspace, that external review will be destroyed. So those are some options that are available for our review features. If you think that either of those will help your workflow at all and help out your studio, of course, you can get in touch with one of our sales reps or your customer success manager to discuss those options. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to be able to actually demo this, but this is a completely separate tool to Ftrack, so it's not like you're losing out on any functionality here. For those of you here who have potentially been in the industry for a while, I'm sure you may have heard of Cinesync. So this is another synchronized review tool. It is part of our product family. The difference between CineSync and the review features that I've just been showing that are built into Ftrack are, of course, that CineSync is a locally installed application. So you're not looking at your review through a web browser. It's all going to be local. The functionality that this opens up is that you can actually look at the original files, including file formats like image sequences, and of course, provided you have a color calibrated monitor, you can see things in full color accuracy. And we're just mentioning this here as well, because while you do need a CineSync subscription in order to have the synchronized review functionality, as of a couple of years ago, we rewrote CineSync from the ground up. And we are now offering the player that it runs off of, which we call CineSync Play, as a free download to be used just as a local desktop player. So if you just want a way to be able to locally look at those original files, CineSync's available for you to use for that purpose. And it also gives you access without a subscription to an integration with Ftrack. So if you wanted to be able to pull down any of your media from your Ftrack workspace, push notes from a CineSync review back into your Ftrack projects, you do have that functionality. So if you think that that is interesting, that it might help you out at your studios, please go ahead and download CineSync Play and give that a try. All right. And last but not least, let's very quickly take a look at notifications. So we've just done all of our reviews, and we need to make sure that everybody knows what feedback was given. So we will take a look at the inbox and how that's structured, and then we'll look at both where you can set your notification settings for the workspace in its entirety, as well as where users can go and set their own preferences. So the inbox, of course, is right up here next to your user icon. I'm just going to need to do that. There we are. Because I don't have a lot of notes coming in. So just to make sure there's a little bit something that's visible for all of you. You can see here, this is how things display in the built-in notification inbox. So I'm getting notifications from all sorts of notes that have been put in. Here are some status updates that have happened. So that's what that looks like. And there's all sorts of filtering abilities as well. So if I want to filter and just look for a specific project, if I want to look for a type of note, maybe I just want to see notes, maybe I just want to see status changes, maybe I'm just concerned with any new task assignments that I have, I can filter down here. Timeframes, as you just saw, you can set that as well. And then this is for notes that the login user has sent. I can filter for some of that information and look for things that are read or unread as well. So that's the built-in inbox there. And now in terms of setting up what sorts of notifications you can get. So for the workspace in its entirety, you're going to go to the system settings. And oh, I do actually need to go there. There we are. And up in this top area right here, we're going to click notifications. And you can see these are all the categories of notifications that you can set up for the workspace. And you've got the option for email notifications. So are those notifications going to go to your email inbox? Internal notification. So that is it going to appear in your built-in Ftrack inbox. And then you can also opt to include it in a digest email. If you do this, what's going to happen is instead of sending an individual email for every single notification, it's going to group all of those together and send them out in one digest with a whole bunch of notifications included. And you can see up here that you can set that interval. So do you want it 1 time a day, 3 times a day, or 6 times a day, depending on how often you want to receive those notifications. And so this is where you can set that up as sort of a baseline for the workspace in its entirety. And then for each individual user, they can also go into their account from their user icon. And in notifications over here, they can actually further refine that based on their own personal preferences. So do they want to receive those in digest emails? Do they only want internal notifications? And so forth. And that's where they can control all of that. And lastly, we do also support desktop notifications, so you can turn those on as well. If that is something that you want to see, you like getting a little pop-up to notify you of new things that are coming in. And that is everything for today. So we did take up quite a bit of time. Very quickly, some homework to practice what we've gone over today. So practice submitting some things for review. If you'd like to keep it simple, you can just drag and drop those reviewable files in the UI, or if you've already got Connect installed and you're using that at your studio, maybe you want to publish through our standalone publisher. set up some review sessions. So create some internal lists for some internal reviews, set up some client review playlists, and then conduct a mock review session. Maybe find someone that you can invite to a review, test out our sync features, test out all of the annotation tools, and see how that works for you.
And I suppose with that, from the whole team here at Ftrack, we really appreciate you spending time with us, especially this time of year, everything that's happened to us to do. So really just thank you so much. We are driven by, user experience and feedback, and look forward to seeing you at the next session. Thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your Tuesday. We'll be with custom attributes.